So this next module is, of course, entitled Accredited Data Providers. So a first step in this discussion is to understand what is data. Data is information that's collected together for reference and or for analysis. And that's just the general definition. But in terms of reset error, data is what the sensors are detecting and the monitor as a whole device is reporting, generally speaking. And I want you to consider for a moment how much data and how much information that truly is. If you have multiple sensors in a device, which we've already established is required for the standard, and each of those are detecting their respective parameters or pollutants at intervals that are sometimes as frequent as a few seconds, and they're doing this continuously 24/7. Then you have multiple monitors deployed perhaps in a room, depending on the circumstances, and then that many more monitors deployed in a building. And then you have multiple buildings around the world all reporting data from those sensors, again, all of the time. So you can really start to appreciate how compounding this equation really is. Thousands upon thousands of data points being collected every second, every minute, every day, and handling that data properly, both in terms of its volume and consistency, is what the reset air standards are striving to do. And this is really, really a huge component of the success of understanding data in terms of buildings. And there are a few critically important underpinnings associated with this data-themed module that need to be addressed before we dive into the details of what a data provider is. And the first being our current enthusiasm for the Internet of Things and this thing that we call big data. So please recognize that big data is dumb data if the quality of the data is poor. And equally important is understanding that software algorithms, no matter how technically advanced they might be, are really no more adept at fixing poor quality data than a Band-Aid. So the standards that we've developed within Reset Air are meant to protect stakeholders by setting the rigor behind what is defined as intelligent data collection, both with respect to data reporting and data communication. And this is really important because it's intelligent big data that will allow us to leverage information about the built environment and give us positive, proactive ways to actually deal with it. So unless the quality of data is robust, big data is useless. So said another way, and the slide is trying to make an obvious point here, if you're networking the brains of 1,000 chickens, it's not going to produce the intelligence of one Einstein. It's going to be nothing more than the intelligence of 1,000 chickens. So similarly, working with dozens of low-quality sensors, it's not going to produce high-quality data for you. So please don't deploy an army of low-grade, poor-quality monitors and expect to yield high-quality results. And I also want to address this issue of data loss or data intelligibility. What is the acceptable amount of data required in order to be considered representative of a condition that we're trying to analyze? And this is a fundamental question that can be asked of any discipline or industry that is approaching methodologies of research and analysis. And currently, there are woefully few standards or best practices addressing data or how to deal with data intelligibility. When it comes to data collection for the built environment, we actually don't know of any that are holistically addressing the components that are required. So we were really faced with the task of creating a set of rules, in other words, standards, for ourselves based upon the years of pilot projects and case studies and practical applications that we had experienced to date. So the result is Reset Air, a set of standards explicitly designed for software platforms, in other words, data collection services, to be used in tandem with the whole suite of Reset Air standards that we've been talking about up until now in all these modules. And this is to ensure a high quality of data and protect against data that is incomplete and can therefore be misleading. And so the two documents that we're talking about in this module that are part of that suite of AIR standards and are supporting this effort are the Accredited Data Provider Standard and the Methodology for Data Analysis. So the Accredited Data Provider Standard provides a structure for the way in which data is handled, delivered, and communicated for Reset AIR projects. And namely, there really needed to be rules and safeguards in place in order to ensure data quality and prevent data manipulation or falsification. So this document outlines a rigorous process for collecting and reporting data that serves as the quality control, or QA/QC, if you will, allowing us to have confidence in the data. So just like monitoring devices need to be accredited in order to be compliant for use on Reset AIR projects, only Reset AIR accredited data providers are permitted on Reset AIR projects as well. And the second document, the methodology for data analysis, is the document that explains the evaluation process of the data that is collected from your project, which determines your eligibility for certification. And think of this as the math behind a project's passing or failing certification. And again, these are all available for free download on the reset.build website. So now recall, if you will, that Reset AIR is a performance-based certification standard, and it's unique that way. It's an ongoing certification that is entirely the point of Reset AIR and the real benefit of the standard. And projects are therefore continuously monitoring and always being reviewed and evaluated. However, there is one really important landmark phase in the Reset AIR process, and this is the initial data audit, which is the 3-month sort of judgment phase, for lack of a better word, that enters the project into certification. And this is not to be confused with a site audit, which is also a requirement of certification. But this is the data audit that we're talking about here in this module, where the performance of the project is being evaluated based on the data completeness and target pollutants. So those two main criteria that I'm talking about are the main parts of this evaluation. The first is completeness of the data. In other words, did the project's monitors properly collect and report sufficient data that can then be evaluated? And the second is target pollutants. Did your project meet the requisite pollutant thresholds as outlined in the standard? And again, this is in respect to which AIR certification you are pursuing, CI or CS. Okay, so how does this actually look when we step back a little bit and look at the entire ecosystem? If you will, I say open ecosystem for a very good reason here, and this is a really key word that I want everybody to remember. It's a purposeful statement. Reset AIR is monitor and data provider agnostic, and we welcome any and all partners and manufacturers and services who want to participate and join us in this process. I want everyone to absolutely remember that part. We don't sell monitors, and we're not a part of selling exclusive data provider services either. So again, more the merrier. This is indeed an open ecosystem. So step one here is involving the Reset AIR building standards. So the CI or CS, those two standards that we have been talking about, that ensures that accredited monitors are properly deployed in the built environment to be representative of the air that the occupants are breathing. And these monitors have to be installed in comparable ways. And so that is why those standards exist. And that's step one here. Step two is the role of the accredited data providers. So these are a variety of private data cloud services. Again, agnostic. We invite people to provide this service as they see fit, as long as they comply with the Reset standards. And they're all collecting data from these monitors accordingly, ensuring that the data is consistent and, again, comparable. So because this module is dedicated to explaining what a data provider is, let's look at this with a little bit more detail for just one second. A Reset Air accredited data provider is a data aggregator that specializes in the transfer of data collected from accredited monitors. So again, the critical role of the data provider is to employ a common set of rules as defined in the Reset standard in order for the data to be reported consistently and with safeguards in place to protect against manipulation or data fraud. So last step in this is the transfer of that data from the accredited data providers to the Reset Assessment Cloud, where it can then be analyzed under the Reset Air lens for consideration for certification. In other words, the aforementioned criteria of data completeness and your pollutant thresholds. So for both Reset Commercial Interiors and Reset Core and Shell, they both require that the data is organized and transferred to the Reset Assessment Cloud consistently in order to become Reset Air certified. So the last piece that I want to address is the role that the accredited data providers serve for communication. And this is really important. The data provider must be able to display the required information in a way that can be viewed either on an app or on an LCD display or similar. And while this might seem really simple, it is deceptively difficult. And if you've ever tried your hand at data viz, you can sympathize with the time and effort that it takes to visualize, again, hundreds of different data points, trying to make this digestible for the average person to understand. So this is an example of what monitoring data looks like when it's collected and reported. And you can see here that we've got these sort of peaks and valleys that are indicative of monitoring. This is showing the reset baseline and then the high performance target line. And again, this happens to be measuring PM 2.5, but this interface is dependent upon the data provider that you're using. And then this is what the data looks like under the Reset Cloud lens. So in other words, when the data provider has sent that to Reset, the lens looks at it in a very specific way under criteria that is specific to certification. So in other words, the pollutant thresholds averaged during hours of occupancy. And when that is overlaid on it, you can see that the data is legible and easy to understand. So here you can easily see that here's what we're concerned with when it comes to Reset certification. And if we look at what you're being judged on, and again, judgment is the only word that I can really think of to describe what we're doing as far as looking at your criteria for certification, most of the windows are showing that this project is performing quite well. And if it were continue to perform consistently like this, it's very likely that it would be a contender for a high performance certification. So Reset Air certification requires meeting the minimum indoor air quality parameter thresholds for a consecutive 3 months. A cycle is considered a month. Basically, it's 4 weeks. And it's a calendar month because you need to start your audit period at the beginning of a month. That is when your sort of critical stage will begin. And 3 months, consistent reporting is what is required. We realize also that it's hard to be perfect all the time. So I want everyone to understand that there are buffers in place to account for and give you a little bit of latitude for a couple of really poor air quality events or periods of missing data. And if you'd like to read further into the data analysis methodology or the data provider criteria, the standards are available again for download. It's always for free on the reset.build website. And if you need to find a Reset accredited data provider for your project, you can find contact information there as well. So please be sure to visit the reset.build website regularly as our ecosystem continues to grow. And that concludes this AP training module. I look forward to sharing with you information in our next module where we will be reviewing some case studies and innovations in indoor air quality techniques.